Thank you for coming to another Tony Montana video. The usual reminder that all the content in the Tony Montana channel are for educational and historical purposes. We aim to record history for future generations. The following is an interview with Harry Hargroves. When did you get your first dog? I got my first dog in 1968. It was a Leitner bred dog that I bought in North Carolina, and she went on to win 2 fights the following year and died of old age. By that time I had different and more dogs that I started using from there on out. But that's it, I got my first dogs in 1968. When did you like to start a young dog? Usually around 16 to 18 months. Watch the dog on the chain and it will tell you when they want to start. Most of the time that is the way I go. How do you school a dog? To school a dog you must put him in the pit and get him started with another dog and see what he looks like, how his actions are, and go from there. Normally you are looking for speed, balance, wrestling, mouth, and take all that into consideration, and that will tell you what to do from there on out. Who did you learn the most from in breeding? I was pretty well a loner, and so I did it on my own, made my own mistakes, and I got a pretty good picture on breeding dogs. And I think the record from that time on shows I did a fair job at it, but I have had some of the best there is out there. Who was your teacher to condition? I didn't have a teacher to supervise me in conditioning, as I lived far from anybody that had any pit bull dogs whatsoever. As I said before, I was a loner and made my own mistakes, and I went from there. I got a pretty good system now that works for me. What was the first conditioning program you ever used? It's like I just got through saying, I made up my own and went with it. That's the conditioning program I use. What do you think about the use of steroids? I really don't care for the use of steroids, but in some cases you have to use them to compete. That's my thoughts on steroids. What do you feed your match dogs? I feed 2 types of meat. I use horse meat with a rice base, and the best thing I have found so far are the Peak products from Fort Dodge. It really works. If you use those items and keep them balanced, you will have a good dog. That's basically the way I feed my dogs. What is your favorite type of equipment to work a dog on? I use a treadmill completely. I don't use anything else as long as they will work the treadmill. Some stubborn dogs won't work the treadmill, so I come up with different methods to work them, and that varies from dog to dog. But I like the treadmill and it does a good job. When you were getting started in the dog game, who did you consider the best of the old timers? Bob Finley would come in there pretty close to first. James Crenshaw was way up there on my list, Jr. Bush, J.E. Alexander, and there were some younger people that turned out to be pretty good dogmen that are still in the game, just as I am. Who in your opinion is the best conditioner and handler that you know of? The best handler that I know of is Robert Sweatman. He is a competitor, he knows what to look for, he knows how to win by handling, and he could do it all. The best conditioner, I am going to say, I am. Because look at my record, I'm pretty cotton pickin' hard to beat, so you can take that as it is. What was the best match you ever saw? I have seen several really good matches, but I think one of the best I've ever been at was when Robert Sweatman's Susie dog went into Irish Jerry's Pool Hall Red Dog. I think that was one of the better ones. Also, this little dog in Florida named Pistol that belonged to the Holland boys, he was a very good dog and had tough matches every time. So neither one of these dogs had a one-sided pushover, and so I consider these 2 of the best matches I've ever seen. What was the best dog you ever matched into? The best dog I ever matched into was Jackson's Pepper dog. The reason I think she was the best is she had everything you needed to win. Extremely hard mouth, real quick, strong, and as I said before, she had everything. She turned out to be a real good dog and a real good producer. I will stick with V. Jackson's Pepper dog. What is the best dog you ever beat? I don't really know what's the best dog I ever beat, as I beat quite a few and some were better than others. Probably some of the better ones didn't look like that good of a match, but they were really well bred, good, tough and honest bulldogs. One of them was the Razor dog that went into Gus from James Crenshaw Kennels and was matched by some boys out of Nashville, Tennessee. Now that was a jam-up dog. He didn't really look too good that night, but it seems to be a pattern when they go into Gus, they don't look good. What's the best dog to beat you? I am going back to Jackson's Pepper dog. She was as near perfect as I ever saw. She knew what she was out there to do and she knew how to do it, and I'd like to have a barn full of them anytime. So again, I stick with Jackson's Pepper dog. What style of dog do you prefer? I like a straight ahead, quick and smart dog. They are really hard to beat and I am just one that is stuck on speed. If they are fast, they get the job done. What type of dog do you not like? I don't like a dog that lies around and tries to survive and then come back and win at the last minute. The name of the game is action. A dog that lays around with a skin hold, hanging on, is not action and is open to much punishment. And in my opinion, cannot live long enough to be a good dog. I am going to ask you about the names of some greats that went out in the past that you may have seen, and your comments on them. SDP's Grand Champion Buck. I didn't see Grand Champion Buck go at all, but any dog that wins 6 matches and up, has got to be pretty good, and from what I've heard, he was better than pretty good. He was a great dog. Garrett's SDJ Champion Jeep. I saw Champion Jeep go 3 times and he was far better than average, but he was not the best dog in his litter and he was not at the top of pit bull dogs. Even though he has a real good record for producing, he wasn't that great himself. The best dog in Jeep's litter was Sweatman's Champion Holly and Crenshaw's SDJ Champion Charlie. Charlie was a better dog as he had more mouth, more speed, and better ability and he was just an overall better dog than Jeep. I think Holly was about tied for number 1. Tramp Red Boy. I know nothing about Red Boy as far as action goes, he turned out to be a good producer. I have no knowledge of any action coming from him so I will leave that up to someone else. Holcomb's Champion Yellow John. Yellow John was a pretty good dog. He had one fault that I didn't like, that is he'd lay around and then come back at the hour mark. He did pretty good at that in those days. I don't think they could live long enough to do that nowadays. So I am going to have to say that Yellow John was not a first-class dog to me. Crenshaw's SDJ Champion Rascal. I saw Rascal go 2 times and both times were hard-earned wins. He had what it takes to win and he had an extremely good mouth and good wrestling ability. He was a little lacking on the speed and that is the only thing that I would say could be improved on. I don't think Rascal would have quit to Sykes Champion Samson if he had been grown, cause he was 16 months old when he did quit, as he was a puppy. I went on to see him later and when he was on his 4th fight there was no quit showing in Rascal and it went well over an hour. I say the one mistake that Crenshaw made with him was taking him out too early. Davis SDJ Champion Midnight Cowboy. I saw him one time and he was extremely game and had a quick mouth that could bite real good. But he wasn't in the best of shape that night and he had it hard for well over an hour, and he won the fight in a little over 2 hours. I liked Cowboy then, and still do. Tant's Grand Champion Yellow. He was a fairly good pit dog. He made Grand Champion and that says a lot. He was one that liked to lay around and then come back to win, that part I didn't like. He turned out to be a first-class dog and he was a real good producer. The yellow dog I think was up there on the top of all bulldogs. Grand Champion Hellbend. I refereed 3 of his 5 fights. He was a good all-around dog, had an extremely good mouth and good ability. He was not too quick but he just seemed to have what it took to win. Lots of people tried to whip him cause they thought they could, but they came up short. So I will say that Hellbend ranks up there. Otter's SDJ Champion Tonka Bear. I never saw Tonka Bear go, but I know he went uphill from 48 pounds to 53 pounds and whipped a good bulldog. He was extremely game and was good at everything, except he didn't have any mouth. That's the only fault I know of with Tonka Bear. His owner Otter agrees with that statement. He tried to breed some mouth in by breeding Hellbend into that line to get more mouth. He did have some accomplishments with it. I will say that Tonka Bear was worth feeding. Mountain Man's champion Homer. I don't know anything about Homer, but I do know that Mountain Man had two champion Homers. I don't know anything about either one except that I think they were real good dogs by the accomplishments they made, and I will leave that up to Mountain Man to finish. SDJ champion Honey Bunch. Honey Bunch I know hardly anything about, other than the fact that she was a good producer. She was off a line of dogs that had good mouths and good ability. I have a lot of stuff that is down off of Honey Bunch and they are really hard to beat. I like every one of them. I think Crenshaw and Finley like them and they are two of the best to make judgment on them. Finley's SDJ champion Bo. I owned Finley's Bo. I bought him from Finley after they made the Jeep breeding. The first breeding I made, I got Outlaw off that breeding and I think that Outlaw was better than anything in the Jeep breeding. Basically it was a Jeep dog with mouth. Both lines are similar dogs and they are bred really close not to be out of the same litter. I think that Finley's Bo was the best producing dog that has been. Including the Patrick stuff or anybody else's stuff because he was bred less than 100 times his entire career. These other dogs have been bred that many times and thousands more. I am going to say that Finley's Bo was the best producer that has ever been, and anybody that knows him and what he has produced, will have to agree. People say that Bo quit. I don't think he did. When I bought Bo, Crenshaw told me what the deal was on Bo losing. I won't repeat it. I do know that he did produce. I do know that the person that was in the pit that night is a number one crook, and when it comes to bulldogs he is the last man I would want to make an opinion on anything. He knows who I am speaking of, so I won't go any further than that. Harry, you have been close to many great dogs. Can you tell the readers about some of them I will name? Grand Champion Molly B. Molly B was bred by James Edwards. I bought her from James as a young dog. I matched her 8 times and she won 8 fights. She whipped a lot of good dogmen and some of them I don't remember their names, but I know she went from Louisiana to North Carolina. Up and down the East Coast and took on anyone that came along and she whipped anyone she went into. Her shortest fight had 3 bites in it and they picked up the other dog. That was against Atlas Brewer from North Carolina and he had the dog to beat her, or so he told everyone in the country at that time. But he found out he was wrong. Everyone else thought they could beat her. They found out they were wrong. As to what happened to her bloodline, it has been washed away like many of the old lines, and there are very few lines that are going strong. Her blood just passed on and around like many others did. I still like the stuff that came from her back then, even though I got some of it now that's not nearly as good as she was. So I am going to have to say that's pretty well washed out. Grand Champion Outlaw. Outlaw was bred by me. He was bred to a daughter of Honey Bunch and Rascal and he was an extremely good bulldog and wound up winning 7 fights. I matched him 6 of the 7. Probably the best win he had was against B. Adams in Kentucky in 1986. At that time I sold him to T. Smith in Alabama and he bred him from that time until he sold him to Ricky Jones. Then Ricky matched a 37-pound dog against a 42-pound dog and Outlaw won the fight, but they both did not recover. I would say that's his best and hardest fight. The ones I had were fairly easy. The offspring that he has put on the ground are some of the best. I've got a yard full of it and we use it all the time. I've got 2 or 3 out there that's going to be hard to beat that are open to anybody. Just call my phone number. There is a lot of rumble going around about certain dogs and Gus is one of them. He doesn't back up and all you have to do is call my number and we'll see what's going to happen. And this goes for anybody, anytime. So anybody that hears this or reads this, just call me. That's about all I can say about the Outlaw stuff, is that it's going strong and I am staying with it. Grand Champion Rufus. Rufus was bred by Mr. Townsend and me down in Florida. He had a tree biting problem and didn't have any teeth when he was young and he won 6 fights. Rufus had it all as far as I know. He was game, and I mean deep game, but it was never proven. He had the one thing I really like in a bulldog and that's quickness. He was extremely quick, hard-mouthed and a good wrestler, and other combinations you might need to win. The best line he has got going now is Hargroves Croc O Mock. he is producing like Rufus did. He was as good as Rufus, just a larger model. Anybody that has got any Rufus dogs now will tell you that they are in good shape and still going strong, and I have some in my yard that are matchable and ready to go at any time. That's all I can say for Rufus and Croc O'Mock, as they are both dead and gone. Hargroves Spanky was not a good pit dog, as he won one fight in 2017, and after the fight I gave him back to the person that bred him, which was Atlas Brewer in Wilson, North Carolina. He had no mouth speed, he didn't have any bite, he was clumsy and you couldn't work him. That is a trend that goes, that should have been a draw. That's about all I have to say about anything from Spanky and Snooty. Which those are minor. If I can get 3 out of that group, that's good, but I want speed first, gameness second, and mouth third. You can win with that combination, so I will stick with that. All you gotta do is call me. I don't push anybody into any matches, but I don't back up for anybody in any matches. Gus is open at 47/48 pounds, and we will leave it at that. I have several outlaw dogs out there that are not as good as Gus, but they are worth taking to the woods. They are open also, and so I am going to say the breeding, not just one, but many of the outlaw stuff today is better than the Rufus stuff and the Molly B stuff. So, I am going to push the outlaw stuff until my Rufus stuff gets back together and gets back like it used to be. So right now I am going to say that Gus is the best breeding I ever made. Map good. I am going to stick with his breeding program because I know he knows what he is doing and he is putting good dogs out there all the time. I don't use Carl's dogs hardly any at all because they have big heads and they are slow. I don't like a slow dog, and that's me, and the reason I don't like a Carl Mims dog. But I still think he is one of the better breeders out there, and we will leave it at that. Don't try to sell them to you. He has good dogs to sell and he is doing real good at it, and I think that right now he is one of the better people to be dealing with. There are some other people out there just as good, but I don't know them, I just know they are out there. I am only familiar with the people in this area, and I can't speak for the people in Texas and out in that part of the country. I am sure there are good dogs and good dogmen out there, but I am still going to stick with Carl Mims. I hope you enjoyed listening to this interview. If so, press the like button and subscribe to the channel to get notified when new ones are published. This is Tony Montana bringing you new content for people looking to learn about the historical characters that made up the breed we have today. Love your dogs and give them your 100%. Until next time.